Hey there.
Mr. Ferranda, how art thou?
Let's try it again.
No.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So I'm going to share this to my Facebook page. And we don't have a fancy intro. No Tim Judge today. No fancy intro. But I can promise you that the next little while is going to fly by. So a lot has changed since you and I were on this platform. All right.
Oh, you're not kidding.
All right. So let's review real quick.
We're in the same company now.
We work in the same office. I'm sitting in your old office.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
And we merged with Howard Hanna Rand Realty back in May.
Right.
And you're in your first month under the umbrella as well, I think.
Actually, a little bit more than that. I think we were officially September 1, I think. So we're like a month and a half in.
About 6 weeks. And we haven't killed each other.
Not yet. But that's because we're not in the office at the same time a lot. So it's good. It's like having the perfect marriage, right?
Good fences make good neighbors.
Exactly. No, I'm very excited. I'm very excited that you're there.
So we are, I'm live streaming this on my Facebook page. If you want to, jigger around with it yourself, you can, but it'll be recorded. And so one of the more interesting discussions that we've had is very, very relevant to what's going on in the industry today. What am I talking about? Well, there have been some pretty groundbreaking lawsuits which have occurred. And in two instances, Remax and Anywhere, which is the parent company of Coldwell Banker and Century 21 and ERA and a couple other brands, Better Homes and Gardens, have settled for tens of millions of dollars. And the repercussions around the industry are vast and far reaching. For example, NAR, in like an astonishing change of policy, has basically casually said, yeah, you don't need to offer any compensation on the MLS. The very definition of the MLS for decades has been an offer of cooperation and compensation.
Correct.
So that's my rendering of it. You are very excited about this.
Oh, I'm excited, and I have a rant. I have a rant, which you've heard how many times, where you're like, all right, take a sip of water, and excited about it. So let me explain the rant, and then I'll explain the excitement. So here's the rant. So I'm reading all these articles, about Remax and Anywhere, and I think there's another one too, isn't there? Maybe those two are the first two, and then NAR. And here's my rant. The rant is, what NAR has stated is that there was never really an obligation for a listing agency to really give out a commission per se. And what their explanation was is that you could always give out $1 or 1 cent, that there was never a criteria or rule of how much the compensation had to be. You could give out a penny. So what they're basically saying is, what's the biggest deal now that if we said that you had to give compensation, but you could give as little as a penny, or now we're saying you don't have to give anything. What's the big deal? And I read that in a NAR article. And
did you feel gaslit?
Gaslit is putting it mildly. And I was furious at that article. And the reason why I'm furious at that article is for this. I have been saying for probably close to 2 decades now, and for those who may or may not know, I've been using an exclusive right to represent agreement where 100% of the Mark Seiden real estate team buyers must hire us as an exclusive right to represent with a guaranteed minimum number of apples that we procure in each deal from each client. And I've been doing that for over a decade, probably close to 15 years or more. But my rant about the 20 years has been this. Where does the law state that a listing agent and seller get to define how much a buyer's agent or buyer's brokerage is able to procure as commission or income on a real estate transaction? Where is it written that a seller gets to state, based on their listing presentation and based on how well they are or are not able to negotiate a commission with a seller, that will designate how high, medium, or low a buyer's agent income is, and that's static, and the buyer's agent has no rights.
Okay.
I've been fuming about this for decades, and I've really gotten into it with some agents who represent the listing side on, we're not allowed to ask for more. It's unethical. It's illegal. They've used as many things they can. Where is that written that anybody else has the right to tell me what I'm allowed to earn on the buy side? But on the listing side, I have a right to go in and attempt to get whatever commission I want.
Okay.
That's rant number one.
All right. Before you go to rant number two, I have two thoughts. First thought is that the idea of, if you want me to work for you, you have to hire me. And part of the act of hiring me delineates what my compensation will be, seems astonishingly reasonable.
Correct.
And it's also something I do myself. If you want me to work for you, you got to hire me.
Right.
Right. The second thing, and I'm going to be a devil's advocate here. Where is there some sort of, I don't know, thought that the offer of compensation is non-negotiable? Like, for example, when we have listed property on behalf of a bank, the bank has said, we want you to pay out a 3% co-brokerage fee. And like, well, that's a little high for this area. You think we could? No, we want you to offer a 3% co-brokerage fee. Okay, you're the boss, you're the client, right? Then there are other listings out there. It's all over the place. Could be half of that, could be a portion of that, right? So I do see offers of compensation varying, right? So where do you think the idea came from that it's not negotiable?
Well, the answer is, I think it just comes from really what I call professional laziness, because that's the way it's always been. And especially where I will tell you, let's say I started this 30 years ago. So I would tell you pretty close to 30 years ago. And I don't know when the exact year it changed, but commissions by tradition, not by law, not by ethics, but by tradition used to be given 50-50. So whatever you were able to procure from a seller, 50% of that went to the buy side and 50% went to the listing side. Yep. Now, that may be true by tradition in this area. I have not seen a law, a rule, an ethical standards of practice, case law, anything that stated that. Yeah. But once someone decides to come off tradition, the person is a pariah. And I've been called many, many, many words in this profession, a lot positive and some negative, and pariah comes up a lot. They may say it using different words, some of them that cannot be said in public, but pariah basically what it is. And I know that I was probably one of the first people in our MLS around here to not give commissions out 50-50.
Well, I just want you to know, from where I sit, you've always been Mr. Pariah.
Right, with a capital P. Exactly. So, and again, I've been told that's illegal, unethical. Where do you get off doing that? Why would you do that? Why do you get more than me and blah, blah. And that really comes to kind of almost like your question is, buyer agency or buyer commissions are negotiable, and it could be negotiable down, but can also be negotiable up. And kind of going back to my first rant is, we would sign an exclusive right to represent with our buyers, and that we work for a certain commission. And if a listing agent is going to offer less than that of what our contracted minimum is, our buyer would be responsible for that differential, And sometimes we put that differential in the price, so the seller would actually just pay it out of proceeds, or the buyer would write its own check. And there have been listing agents out there that have gone beyond ballistic on this, saying that you can't do that. And I love this statement as much as I hate this statement. You can't make more than me. I can't. I can't. I mean, if I have a value added to my client where they feel emotionally, legally, ethically, and whatever else you want to use, that I provide a better service, so they're willing to pay me for that, and you can't do that with your client, where is it that I can't?
Yeah, I mean,
And that's where I kind of get off that I don't understand where the listing side ever thought that they would be able to delineate what a buy side makes. They can't. Rant number 2 is, which kind of goes with rant number 1, is I've always had a challenge that the buy side commission was in the listing side commission. I'm going to use the N word again, never thought that was legal or ethical, ever. I've always thought for over 20 years, since buyer brokerage suddenly came into our area from agents always representing sellers, even if they take the buyers out, that commission should always been broken into 2. And if you really look at things, brokerages, agents, and so on bend over backwards to have an incredible listing presentation to the value added that they're going to give to their sellers.
Yep.
And most brokerages have practically no buyer presentations of why they should be hired as a buyer's agent, because the laziness is, don't worry, you can hire me because it all comes from the seller side anyway. With the consumer not really understanding, whoever they hire could make or break whether they get that house for 10, 20, 30 grand more, at 10, 20, or 30 grand less. Because I always ask each consumer every time, whether I represent the seller or the buyer, is this question. On the seller side, do you think you're going to sell your home for the exact same price and terms, no matter which agent you select? Because if you think it's going to be identical, the only thing you should do is price out commission. But what if it's not identical?
right.
And to the buy side, do you think you're going to be able to purchase your home for the exact same price and terms, no matter which agent you select? Because if the answer is yes, and no one can convince you otherwise, you should only shop commission. But what about if you'll get this house for a different price and terms, no matter which buyer agent you select? And in this market, you ready? If you'll even just get the house. And if I'm a buyer's agent that can win more bidding wars, not necessarily by paying the highest price, or sometimes it is getting my buyer that pay the highest price because that's what they need to do in this market, and other agents can't seem to do that, then yeah, I deserve and I've earned a higher commission rate than any of the buyers.
One of the things, finish your thought.
Yeah, so let me just finish. So basically, I've always been of the opinion that there should be no commissions labeled on the MLS. That when a listing agent does a listing presentation, they should be going in there for what they're going to charge the seller. And whatever they charge the seller, not the buyer's business. There should be no compensation on an MLS sheet. And every buyer, just like they do with listings, should have to prove their value to a buyer and procure a buyer's commission based on that. And if a seller knows that they're going to be paying less commission, then by definition, the seller would probably sell the house for less. Because I will tell you, in every listing presentation, even in this market, the seller always asks, well, if I sell it for this, what am I going to net?
Yep.
Well, the net calculation is based on what's the gross commission they got to pay.
Yep. Yeah.
So coming full circle, Phil, even in this market, but there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of bidding wars. If a seller is paying less commission, there's going to be a certain number at some point that they're willing to take. And if a buyer now has to pay commission, which they've always had to pay, because it's been built into what seller's going to be, there's going to be a different maximum that a buyer may want to pay or not pay based on all the expenses. And just because the previous commissions were built in to the seller's expenses are now to be taken out of the seller's expenses, but now paid directly by the buyer. Net is net and gross is gross. And everybody should have a right to negotiate the fee that they're responsible for. And so coming to that second part of what I said about NAR that they said is, well, you've always had a right to say, as a listing agent, I'm only going to pay 1 penny out as commission. That's not a fair argument, because as a listing agent, if I only paid out 1 penny to the buyer agents before all this started, I would be called a pariah. I'd be called someone who is not looking to cooperate in our world of agency. And how could you do that? And you're a pig and you're this and all that other stuff, which is very different than now the change that's, oh, it's a coming. We're now probably eventually the sellers will just be signing a contract for whatever the seller's going to pay the listing agent, and the buyers will be selling a contract for what the buyers are willing to pay for their agent. That's very different than a listing agent offering 1 cent in a community that thinks everyone is supposed to cooperate.
50-50 and everything like that.
Rant over.
Gotcha. Good rant. Good couple of rants. So in the absence of value,
Yeah,
cost becomes a huge objection.
correct.
And to your point that companies have bent over backwards to have a phenomenal value proposition to sellers, they don't really do the same thing with buyers. They don't have a fancy, glitzy, awesome presentation to buyers. They don't have a great value proposition to buyers. As a matter of fact, the value proposition most companies have to buyers is it doesn't cost you extra to have us represent you.
Wow. I mean, let me put it in a different way. I'm going to talk about legal. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. So Miranda rights, and I know I'm not going to get this correct, and I'm not even going to talk about all the beginning part of Miranda rights. But if you need an attorney and you can't afford one or elect not to have one on your own, we'll basically provide a free one for you.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get it for free.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying the attorneys that do or do not represent
Public
those that
defenders
have to go that route, but perceptually, are those known as probably the best attorneys that are going to get someone off of what they've been convicted to.
Public defenders do not have the cachet of a Johnny Cochran.
Right. And besides cachet, do they even have the conversion rate? And what I call conversion rate is, do most of those people get off compared to if people hire their own lawyers? And the more expensive the lawyer, is the conversion rate of acquittal higher? Now, lawyers have the exact same degree as each and every other lawyer. Lawyers work with the exact same laws with those squiggly lines and paragraph and everything of what the law stated. There's no difference between lawyer and lawyer, which means agents all have the exact same license, just like lawyers, and agents all work with the exact same database. Lawyers work within the law, agents work with the MLS. If there's 11,000 plus agents in our MLS, are you telling me there is no difference between how one agent negotiates and knows agency law, the laws of even though the attorneys take care of the laws, but how things work and inspection negotiation and all these other things, none of us do it better than anybody else. Because if some do it better than others, they should get paid more because they're going to save their clients a ton more.
A ton of money.
And it's really interesting that for over a decade, probably close to 15 years, 100% of my buyers have to sign an ERR with minimum compensation. Meanwhile, with that being on the books, we have more testimonials on Google and Zillow than probably 98% of other agents and brokerages out there. And my office, before we came to Howard Hanna Rand Realty, won best real estate office in all of Westchester County, and we charge more. How
Well,
did
I
that
mean,
happen?
iPhone
Yeah,
costs more.
yeah. So coming to value proposition, yeah, agents are really going to have to figure out what they really bring to buyers of why they should be hired as a buyer's agent. Because I got to tell you, the reason why I'm excited about this is because agents should get paid for whatever they're able
Value.
to negotiate.
Right.
And it's going to be the value proposition.
Yep.
And it can't be just one-sided to the seller. Now it's going to have to be value proposition to whomever you are representing.
Yep.
How is that not fair to the consumer?
No, it's simply what it is the pain of change to a population of people who have grown fat on a model that's been based on sub-agency and did not even envision the idea of buyer agency coming into play. You see, the offer of compensation dates back to pre-buyer agent world, the 1930s,
And if I may
the
correct you,
1940s.
it's not even free buyer agent world. It's free agent that brings a buyer because of a sub-agency.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I didn't say free, pre-buyer agency.
I'm sorry, right.
It made plenty of sense for the commission to be split when everybody worked for the seller. Even the guy working with the buyers worked for the seller. There was no such thing as buyer agency. There was no such thing, right?
So I'm basically saying, welcome to the revolution. And I got to tell you, my agents on my team, we are beyond not nervous. Matter of fact, we're freaking psyched because we already have the scripts, dialogues, objection handling techniques, explanations of commissions. Oh, we actually have a full buyer presentation.
Yeah.
Huge, glossy, hardcover one way, digital on another. Huge buyer presentation of value added of what we do differently than everybody else, with testimonials to show that we do things differently than everybody else.
Yeah.
We're not nervous about this at all. Quite the opposite. It's about frickin' time.
Exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, what we've got right now is the pain of change.
Yep.
Okay. So all of these brands who have been bending over backwards to be the listing brokerage of choice, right, now have to present their value proposition to buyers. And it shouldn't be that hard, right? This is the largest purchase of your life to date, probably the largest purchase you're ever going to make. It's going to be the largest asset you ever own, right? It should not be a do-it-yourself project. You want to do it yourself project, go get an old Electrolux and build a hoverboard, or do something with your family, or build a lean-to, build a treehouse. But do not make the largest purchase of your life something that's a DIY project. It's sort of like that, right? We have the golden Rolodex. We know how to negotiate. We are objective. I could go on and on and on. It could be a long thing. We don't have a lot of time. I'm going to go back to one thing you said. If every company, if every brokerage could offer the buyer the same deal, then commission is going to be the only thing that people can negotiate on. But let's go back to something I know you've experienced, because I've experienced it. If I've experienced it, I know you've experienced, which is the listing agent calls. Hi, Mark, it's Phil Ferranda. I'm the listing agent, and you're one of our 12 offers. You were not the highest offer. You didn't have the best terms. But the seller asked me, of the top 3 offers, say, which were all pretty close, which one did I have the most confidence would close? I said, well, probably Mark Seiden, because I know that he thoroughly educated and oriented and vetted his buyer. And I am sure that absent a black swan event, a death, a closure of their company, something catastrophic, that they will close, because I have the utmost confidence in Mark's buyers. Well, guess what? You weren't the highest. You didn't have the best terms. You were in the ballpark, but the most important thing to sellers is certainty when it reaches this point in the decision-making process.
Correct.
Because we have both seen on the listing side someone come in with an outrageously high offer, but we knew it was a fantasy because it would never appraise.
Right. It wasn't that there was no contingency of any sort of appraisal waiver or anything like that. It's like, oh, you're on for $599. We'll offer you $850.
Yeah.
But there's no waiver of any appraisal or anything like that. So, but we'll give you $850 because we want to blow everybody out.
Right.
Yeah, I love
Right.
those.
And we're putting 3% down. So if it underappraises by a nickel, we're going to ask you to eat it.
Right.
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 So the prior model, which was based on everybody working for the seller, kind of flew beneath the radar for decades, probably 30 years, because buyer agency really entered in the 90s. I was signing people up to exclusive right to represent in the 90s upstate. And when I came down here back home to Westchester, I was astonished at how few buyer brokerages representing buyers, agents representing buyers, did not have any kind of written agreement with the buyer. And
interesting, because I started in 93. So I kind of started, I don't know if the exact year this happened, but I kind of started when agency disclosure didn't change yet. So everyone was still a sub-agent representing the seller, but New York State required that now there's a written disclosure. Mouth much? There's a written disclosure.
here's a Mark Seiden.
There you go. Here's the Mark Seiden. I love it. That there was a written disclosure that now the agents who were taking on buyers still representing sellers actually had to put that in writing to the consumers. And I remember all the brokerages basically saying, ready? This is the end of our profession. Well, we're going to never be able to get consumers to sign this. You know, we're done, blah, 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 just like they're starting to say now.
Well, the sky's always falling whenever there's a change, right? That whenever there's a change, this is the worst thing. And how come NAR didn't fight for us and everything like that?
Yeah.
Where have you been? Where have you been? So, but the sky never falls, right?
See, Phil, here's the interesting thing about all this stuff, including agency law 30 years ago, we're having the consumers sign about who you represent. This is where, in my opinion, and you've heard me say this because you just heard me give an agency law spiel this past Thursday. The challenge with agents is they don't understand that all these lawsuits and all this agency law was written to protect the consumer from the agent. And that the agents have no right to collect a commission. The agents are supposed to earn a commission. And that's a big deal that most agents don't understand. You don't have a right to collect a commission. There's nothing there that any agent is supposed to get. You need to earn it. And agency law was written to protect the consumer from the agent. And if you actually read every line and every paragraph in agency law with the protect the consumer hat, not to protect the agent hat, all the language falls into place. And so all these laws of why are consumers bringing this up and screwing with how commissions are paid and all that stuff is very consumer centric. And they're right. I don't care what NAR says. They are wrong. NAR is wrong. They want to throw me out? Throw me out. They've been wrong since first day that I started in real estate, but I just realized it about 20 years ago. They're flat out wrong. It always should have been this way because we are here to serve the public. We're here to serve the consumers. We're here to earn and not collect. And if you put that together, that should be as long as the court trial process needs to take, wherever the court trial process is. That's the case.
So what do you think the repercussions are going to be going forward?
I think at some point in time, it's not just that NAR says you don't have to put a commission. I think what's going to come pretty quickly, and it should be this way, that exclusive right to sell agreements with sellers should only have the seller commission, period. And whatever the agent collects from the seller is confidential. It only has to do with the seller brokerage, the seller, and that seller's agent. And there's not going to be any commission on the MLS. And then if an agent wants to take out a buyer, you better have a value proposition to represent a buyer. Just like there's a value proposition of why you get a listing from a seller and you negotiate a commission. And that's how you go out, because the buyer is responsible for paying you, and you are responsible for making sure the buyer gets the best deal. I never said at the lowest price, especially in this market with bidding wars. Sometimes you have to convince your buyer to actually pay the higher price. And I've got tons of scripts and dialogues for that. And the reason why I want the buyer to pay more now is because if they don't pay more now, when we have to go to our next bidding war 2 weeks from now, they're going to have to pay more than more.
Yep.
So my script is, I need to beat the crap out of you now to pay more than you ever wanted.
Yep.
Because if you don't win, the next one's more than more. So my question is, you want to pay more or more than more? Your choice. But an experienced agent can protect their buyer by doing that, where an inexperienced agent won't. They'll say, yeah, I think that's a good offer, and then they lose. Well, if the consumer listened to the agent, where the agent said, yeah, I think that's a good offer, and the agent was wrong, did the agent earn a commission? Nope.
Ex-nay. Negatory.
And that's where now agents are going to have to put their money literally where their mouth is on both sides. And that's how it always should be. It's not about what makes convenient for the agent. It makes it what's convenient and right for the consumer.
So here's what I think is going to happen. My opinion. I think just about every cataclysmic, enormous sea change that has occurred in our industry has resulted in a new piece of paper for the consumer to sign. And I think what's going to happen is the listing agreements are going to have their verbiage changed, obviously. But I think sellers are going to have an opt-in to offer a commission to buyer agents. And I think the industry is going to lean very heavily on Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller. Here's 2 listings. All right. Listing number 1 is offering a X% commission to buyer agents to bring a buyer. And listing number 2 is not going to offer any commission. Which one do you think will sell first? Oh, I think the one that offers the commission. That is why
I have a rebuttal for
offer
that.
buyer agent commission.
I have a rebuttal for that.
I know you will, but that's what I think is going to be the answer. Because if you read the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, and I've been in 6 or 8 MLS systems, they all read the same thing. They all look like the summary of the last 6 or 7 consumer debacles. Like, for example, there's something in there about an exclusive agency that sellers have to sign, saying they understand the difference between exclusive right to sell and exclusive agency. I think that 50 years ago, somebody made a big fuss about the fact that the exclusive agency is an option and it was never presented. But now it's in the paperwork. Nobody does it, hardly. I've probably done more exclusive agencies than anybody, but that's a whole other thing. But I think that's probably what's going to happen. The listing agreement is going to have an opt-in. But I also think that smart brokerages are going to do what Mark Seiden does, which is invest heavily in a value proposition that will make people realize that they need representation. Not all agents are the same, and that they have to hire the agent if they want to get true representation. That second one is going to be harder because you're taking 1.5 million people and changing the way they do business.
Well, those 1.5 million better change fast, because I think it just like it happened with, you're gonna have to get a consumer to sign an agency disclosure that you actually represent the other side. So, you know, you got to get on this bandwagon. The reason why I rebut that is this.
Yeah, I
This
want to
would
hear your rebuttal.
This would be my script, and here's my rebuttal. In today's market, I don't think there'd be any different technically of what the seller's going to get if there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 offers on a property. So if the seller could end up paying, let's say, on a $500,000 house, 2.5% less, which is $10,000. You know, does the seller really think that their home is going to sell for more than $10,000 less if they don't order commission? Because remember, if they don't give out that 2.5, they can not sell that house for 10,000. I'm not saying that right. They can sell that house for 10,000 less and still make the same, still net the same amount of money.
Well, that's why for sale by owners have such a headache, because they think they're saving a commission, but the only buyers that really engage them think they're saving a commission.
Right. And
Who's
everybody
saving
wants to sell it for less. Right. And number two is, I would tell you, in this market, in today's market, I understand what you're saying, and that may be the soft way to kind of introduce this through. But I got to tell you, I don't think there'd be any seller by the time I finish having my counsel with them that they would feel that they would sell their house for $1 less if they offered a buy side commission or not, with all these offers coming through. Because
well, I mean, yeah. So
because agents are going to need to learn, if they're going to expect that everything's going to be okay with, I'm going to say your thought is what I call the soft landing.
Yeah.
We'll be able to do that. Here's another reason why that's going to be a legal disaster for an agent. You ready? It is against the law. It is against the law of agency for a real estate agent to decide what properties they're going to show a consumer, counsel a consumer of what's best for them based on commission. So if an agent thinks there's going to be a soft landing, like I'm just going to see if I can convince my buyers to take, to go to the ones that offer compensation, I'm letting you know that's going to be a very quick next lawsuit coming. So because if a real estate agent, because what most agents don't understand, when they sign forget commission or exclusive right to represent, an agency, non-exclusive agency agreement. If an agent knows of a for sale by owner that's for sale, that would be perfect for the buyer, where the agent would collect no commission on. If the agent does not bring that property to the buyer's eyes that exists, most agents go, yeah, that's poop. Forget that. Mark is full of it. Here he is, a pariah. That they actually broke agency law. Wait until the agents start doing this soft landing stuff. That's going to be the next set of litigation.
Well, proving the negative is difficult, right?
Yep.
But especially since most for sale by owners are not on the MLS. But you make me think of a follow-up question, which is this. Let's suppose you do bring a buyer to a for sale by owner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, clearly you represent the buyer. You don't have the listing. It's an open listing, as we call it. The industry parlance is that it's an open listing.
Phil, make your life easy. We have an exclusive right to represent. Our buyers know that if we're going to bring them to that they're going to be obligated to pay a certain commission, whether they want to knock on their door directly or whether we do that for them, which is why they let it to us for us. And we'll go to the seller and say, you are obligated to pay no commission to our side. The buyer is going to pay any and all commissions to the brokerage.
Right. And this is what you're going to net, and it's going to be paid from the proceeds, et cetera, right?
Right. And so the answer is that you'll owe nothing. We'll either want to do something with the price so the buyers can finance it. And by the way, the answer is no, it's not a seller's concession, because there are definitions of what a seller's concession is. And increasing a price due to commission, believe it or not, is not a seller's concession, because commissions are normal expenses that are usually paid by a seller. So prices are negotiated up or down many times based on a negotiation of commission to manipulate price. Agents just only know that going down. They don't understand the same laws effect going up.
So the agents who present a value proposition to their buyer clients get hired and have the same exclusive right to represent for the buyer that any listing agent has with the seller are going to be the ones that sleep at night.
Correct. And my value proposition is, even though my buyer is paying commission, I can convince them of this and I can show them this, even though they may have to pay me $10,000 in commission to do this deal. Based on how we negotiate the comparisons that we'll be able to show the seller, how we work negotiations, how we're able to work renegotiations based on inspections, how we're able to include things in, maybe even throwing a for sale by owner seller, then they don't even know anything about a homeowner's warranty, that maybe we get the buyer to pay the homeowner's warranty for the seller, which is hundreds of dollars, but the sellers may think, the for sale by owner sellers may think it's thousands of dollars. Based on how we negotiate, Mr. or Ms. Buyer, if you pay us $10,000 to represent you, we will most likely save you $10, $20, $30, $40,000 in this negotiation, because we're really good at this. Or you can go to court without any attorney representation by yourself. Do you know everything about certificates of occupancy? Certifications that don't need a C of O?
No, you never,
Blah, 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 blah.
you never go to a gunfight with a knife.
Right.
And in the largest transaction of your life, you should walk in there with a freaking Tommy gun.
And you know what, Phil, what it basically is, which should be the same with any, even a listing presentation, it takes money to make money. So the reason why, seller, you're gonna be okay to pay me this amount of money to represent you is because if you didn't have me, you would net less money after transaction if you hired somebody else or went on your own. That's the argument.
Yeah.
And the agent will go, well, yeah, that's our argument going in. That's where they should list with us. Why would it be any different for a buyer? I
Yeah.
don't get it.
Well, it's up to us to convey the message though, right? I mean, that's going to have to be what we do. And there's going to be people who kind of disrupt it with the low hanging fruit, free, you don't pay me, blah, blah, blah. Right. So this leads me, I got a question for you. And I think you did a lot of short sales back in the crash, right?
Yep.
Okay. Did you ever see, how do I word this? I have to say it like a statement, and I'm going to ask if you saw the same thing. A lot of the people that were in a rough spot over the years, whether it was the crash or not, but a lot of the people who were in trouble, if I went back to when they originally acquired the house, they were either underrepresented or unrepresented. So here's what I mean. They used a buyer agent that didn't do any due diligence. They unlocked the door and they collected their commission, and they didn't even know that, for example, there was no certificate of occupancy for the finished basement or something like that. And the attorney had missed it. It flew by the attorney because the attorney's never been to the house. Right. Did you ever see?
Can I add to that? Can I add to that?
Yeah.
It is not an attorney's job to do that.
No, it's not.
When an attorney does legal for the representation of a buyer or seller, their job is to do the legal. Their job is not to do the research. So anybody who thinks, oh, I don't need an agent, the attorney will handle it. Oh my goodness, are you wrong?
Yeah.
That is not the attorney's job. They don't do that due diligence.
Yeah.
The due diligence they do is based on title and municipality. They don't do all that other due diligence that a real estate agent is obligated to do. So you're right. They've been way underrepresented.
So years ago, I want to say it was 2008, I was in a closing, and the buyer agent showed up, and they were immigrants. I don't recall the exact country they came from, but they were all speaking a different language. And the attorney had come up from the city, and the upshot of it was that the taxes on the house and the MLS were from the prior year. So I think it said 2007 taxes were $10,000, and the taxes were actually $1,800 higher. And the 2008 taxes were $1,800 higher. And the people had an absolute fit that the taxes were wrong. Now, remember, things were on the market back then for 9 months, for a year and a half. Things took forever to sell, right? And I said to the buyer agent, did you verify the taxes? Did you go to the tax assessor and verify the taxes? Or did you just unlock the door and now you expect to get paid?
Bill, it's so funny that you said that. At 8:30 this morning, I had a conversation with one of my buyer agents who has an accepted offer on a property. And actually, it's a co-op, I think. Where actually it's one of the few properties that's been on for a while. One of my agents who did her correct due diligence, literally over the last couple of days, called me in a panic and said, Mark, the common charges are wrong. And not only are the common charges wrong, there's an extra assessment that's not on the MLS. And how she found that is that she did put in through, my team and, to get the correct homeowners association information. But in addition to that, just started looking at other co-ops that were on the market in that building.
Yeah.
And every other listing had an assessment. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not too sure whether this deal is going to happen or not. And that's whatever the seller's going to do. But my buyer's agent actually started to earn her commission. She did research. What a concept.
What an idea, right?
And that just happened at 8:30 this morning.
So yeah, so pet peeve time, right? You had your rant. One of the things that drives me absolutely batty is when an agent will call me and say, I'm looking at the taxes here. The taxes are $15,000. Like that's what it says. Did you verify that? And I want to just look at the phone, why don't you verify it? Of course I verified it. And I've said sometimes, if you catch me in the right mood. So this is how you verify things as buyer agent. You call the listing agent and ask Scout's honor. Is that your plan? Is that the way you were trained? Why don't you call the tax assessor and get the true tax figure on your own and not waste my time? And then I sound like I'm mean.
Oh, I know. I get this all the time. I have another one for you. I get a call from a buyer's agent that can't show the property at the time that their buyer wants to see the property.
Can you show it?
And wants to know if we would show it. So our flat out answer is no, because we have other things to do. But I want everyone to take this as a concept, because I'm sure there's a lot of agents going like, yeah, what's wrong with that? Let me tell you what's wrong with that. As a buyer's agent, you represent your buyer. And anything that your buyer says is supposed to remain confidential, and you're supposed to give your buyer counsel. Please don't say that in front of anybody on the planet. Now you're asking your buyer to go out with someone who represents the seller, and by definition is going to take anything and everything that your buyer says and hold it against them during a negotiation. That's the seller's agent's legal, by agency disclosure, obligation to do. There is no confidential. There is no, she really shouldn't have said that. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So you're now sending your buyers
into the
unrepresented.
Yeah.
To a very well represented seller's agent, seller who has a seller's agent that will bleed the buyer for information in order to get more blood and money out of this buyer during a negotiation. And that's okay because the agent's busy, as opposed to the buyer's agent should find coverage in their own company, and it may cost the buyer agents some money to do so, but their job is to cost themselves money to protect their clients' money.
Yep.
But instead will attempt to keep their own money, all their 100% of their commission, even if it costs their client $10,000 in a negotiation, because my seller's agent, without the buyer knowing, because my seller's agent could be so nice and charming and sweet, and will ask every question known to be able to bleed that buyer for more money and better terms during a negotiation.
Absolutely.
And an agent will do that to save their commission, even though they're risking money for their client. You know what my answer is? Oh my God.
This is actually why the same principle as to why we don't want sellers present at the showings.
Correct.
Because the buyer's agent is going to kibitz with you, and whatever little hint you reference, whatever offhand remark you make, could end up costing you a lot of money.
Correct. But that's what's called counsel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not presentation, counsel.
Being there. So to get back to this whole situation, it all boils down to demonstrating and proving your value. And this is a big deal in people's lives. And the idea that we're entitled to a commission just because we unlocked a door, as opposed to we really broke a sweat at the building department, verifying information, getting trained, learning how to negotiate, knowing just even which home inspector to refer them to, knowing which mortgage company to refer the folks to. All of that, it matters. Here's a good one, all right? And it's not just real estate agents. One of the worst commoditizations, aside from rate shoppers in mortgages, is when people will choose attorney B because their fee is $200 lower than attorney A. And attorney B makes a screw up. I know attorneys never screw up, except that they do all the time. Just ask the good real estate attorneys, right? And I once had a guy, again, legal fee shopping. The seller's attorney called and asked him, do you want us to do the thing, do something? And the guy, distracted, not realizing the repercussions, called the buyer client. Do you want this done? Yes or no? And the buyer said, no. To which the seller said, okay, well, I guess the deal's off. And he put it back on the market. And it cost the buyer $10,000 to get the house back. But they saved $200 on that legal fee. What's the phrase? Tripping over dollars to pick up pennies?
Yeah. And I always say you get what you pay for. I mean, you just, unfortunately, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on a commission, even $10,000 on a commission is nothing compared to you buying an $800,000 house, or what the differential in buying a house and not knowing if things are inspected correctly or seizable or anything. That stuff will cost you multiples of tens of thousands of dollars, as opposed to what a couple of $1,000s of a commission could be. And here's the interesting thing, Phil. There's going to be a two-pronged education. We're going to have to educate the agents. It's going to be an education of the consumers. What are they paying for? Now, we have our own buyer presentation because we have what's called a commission differential, because we usually collect something different between what is on the MLS where we do, or people pay us an entire fee, and we have sold for sale by owners, and we've collected entire fees.
Yeah.
And we've gotten a big fat thank you from our buyers for doing so.
Yeah, because you got them their home.
The step-by-step representation blew them away.
So you get what you pay for. So I have a bone to pick with Inman News.
Oh,
now, I've written for Inman News. I've spoken at Inman events, but there is a preoccupation with a number of people at Inman News that saving on the commission is something that a smart consumer does, right? So let's save on other things, right? Let's have cost be what we reverse engineer back from in other important aspects of life. Would you fly on a plane with the lowest would you fly an airline with the lowest paid pilots? Would you fly an airline with the lowest paid mechanics? Would you have your wedding at Arby's? It's cheaper, right? Would you get your vasectomy from the cheapest surgeon?
You know what they call the worst surgeon on the planet?
Step into the van.
You know what they call doctor?
Yeah, they do. If you had to remove mold or remediate oil, would you want the cheapest solution? I think a lot of times it's so expensive they would, but if you were designing a children's hospital or a home for your family, would you hire the cheapest architect? Would you hire the cheapest builders would you buy the cheapest materials? If your face were mangled, would you use the cheapest plastic surgeon? If you're investing money that you could not afford to lose, would you hire the cheapest financial advisor?
So Phil, can I put all this in a nutshell? Because all those are great. And I know you have more. You ready for
Last
this?
one, though. This
Go
is
ahead.
the one you want to hear. This is the money shot.
Go.
Would you buy a discount parachute?
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. What I always tell people is, if the product that you're buying is exactly the same, no matter where you get it from, shop price. I'll give you an example. My daughter was looking for a car. She found a car manufacturer that she liked, and she found a model that she liked. And she was going to order the car. And there was one dealership that was charging, I think, a $3,000 or $5,000 premium above the price of the car. And what the instruction that I gave to my daughter was, you really should shop this, because once you place the order in for the car, it goes to the exact same location, which is that manufacturer's factory. No matter where you get that car, the product is going to be exactly the same, because again, wherever you get that car is not necessarily the place you're going to have it serviced. So where you get your car serviced will be very different than where you're going to pick up the car. So when we were looking for the car, which is the exact same product, shop price. When you're shopping for service, the worst thing you can do is shop price.
The worst thing.
And everything that you mentioned was service.
Yeah.
Except for possibly the parachute. But the parachute is not necessarily the same product. So if you got a less expensive parachute, is that product as good as the most expensive parachute? What would be the product differential? But my daughter already picked out the product she wanted at the price point that she wanted to pay. Are there cars that could have been higher quality? Yes. Are there cars that she picked out with lower? Yes. But she picked out the model that she wanted. Once that decision was made, now you can price shop. It wasn't different than any other new car dealership. But everything else you described was a service.
Yeah.
And the worst thing you could ever do is price shop
A service.
service.
I will say that parachutes provide a valuable service.
Yes. And I'll give you an example for that. When I say, are all attorneys the same? Wait, don't answer that question. And help me, Phil, because I'm having a little bit of a brain gas, smelly gas thing going on. But the law firm that was suing Fox, where they won $750 million for who was the plaintiff that won $750 million? It was the voting machine people, whatever their name was.
Not Daimler. Yeah.
Okay, everybody that's on the podcast, I know you're all saying the name and screaming into your phone, but I guarantee you I can't hear you. But let me ask you a question.
Dominion.
Do you think Dominion, who won $750 million, hired the least expensive law firm they could find to represent them in this case? Or is it very possibly one of the most expensive law firms that probably charge more than $500, $600 an hour? They're probably getting a percent of the deal. They're probably getting 10, 20, 30, whatever, know what percent they're getting of the deal. They were probably one of the most expensive lawyers you could ever find. Wait, but Phil, the laws are the same.
Yeah.
For every single attorney and license out there, and all the lawyers have the same license. There's no difference in law license.
Johnny Cochran was not a public defender.
Right. Why would Dominion pick a law firm that probably charges things in the thousands or $10,000 per hour plus a piece of the pie, as opposed to a guy that would charge $400 an hour? Why? Do you want to know the answer?
Results.
Because the results are whoever they hired for Dominion probably had a much higher ability to have a conversion rate to win $750 million.
787 million.
You don't think that's any different with real estate agents? All 11, 12, 13, 14,000 of us,
Yeah.
we all have the exact same results and the exact same skills. We're no different.
Yeah.
Holy moly. Oh yeah, I would put
We absolutely
my
are.
agents negotiating against many others because
Okay.
we refine it.
So would I. So we know then that not all agents are created equal.
Right.
The agents that can convey their value are gonna do whatever pivot they need to. And what's the phrase? If the truth can kill it, it should die.
Right.
Maybe that 1.6 million agents needs to be 1.2 million agents.
Whatever it may be. And I would tell you, I can't wait for commissions to be out of the MLS for the buy side. And I certainly hope, and you're probably true, there's probably going to attempt to be this soft middle where there's going to be an attempt to convince the seller that it's better to give a compensation commission. And all that's going to do is hurt the real estate agent for honing their skill as a value proposition. Because that may be a bridge for a short time. I do not believe that bridge will last very long at all. So if the agents really want to survive, where's your value proposition of representing a buyer?
Come on over to this team and we will teach you how to convey it.
And it's not as hard as anybody thinks.
It's not hard at all. It's not hard at all. We had an agent that was afraid of her own shadow who routinely had a separate check written to the brokerage for 0.5 to 1%, almost every time. And she was afraid of her own shadow, but I trained her to be comfortable in her own skin about this. And you know what? She was a damn good agent. She is a damn good agent.
Bill, we have agents that are collecting next to 2% more than what's on the MLS.
And the people thank them.
Oh, the testimonials are through the roof.
Yeah. So what do I tell people? This hour flies by.
Yeah.
The hour
I tell
flies by.
people you can fight the change. NAR is fighting the change, and they're only fighting the change to save face, and it's purely political. So you're going to hear it from me. NAR is flat out wrong. We all belong to it. We all belong to the association. Associations change, laws change, things change. Wait and see what happens with the property condition disclosure statement in March of 24. That's going to be a big change. But NAR is wrong.
Big changes are coming. Big changes are coming. So what are we going to talk about next week? We're going to do this again next week?
Oh, I think we could talk about this. Maybe we bring up some minor scripts and dialogues and kind of how to overcome this a little bit and everything, or so on and so forth. But I will tell you, unless people understand everything we do is for be for the benefit of the client. And if we do things for the benefit of the client, we will earn our commission. That's the first mindset. If anybody's going to fight that mindset and just feel like we're getting screwed and this is really bad and this is going to change our own industry and we'll never be the same, they're never going to be able to learn a script. Mindset is first and everything else is second. So for those agents that can't change the mindset, wow, there's a reckoning coming.
That's what I say to them. I bid them adieu. All right, Mark, thank you very much. This was fun. We'll do it again.
Thank you.
And thank you. And we'll post when we're going to do this again soon. So
Thanks.
excellent thoughts. Well done.
Talk to you soon.